Hello, welcome to our MOOC on presidential nominating process, the road to the White House. I'm Professor David Caputo, the Political Science Department at Pace University in New York City. We're rapidly approaching February 1st, which is the date for the Iowa caucuses. The Iowa caucuses are unique. They're unique in a variety of ways. One, it's the first actual casting of ballots, not votes, but straw vote and preferential votes for the candidates. Number two, it's first in the nation. It also has a great deal of impact across the political spectrum in terms of the subsequent primaries as the candidates leave Iowa and go on to New Hampshire a week later. So I've decided to divide the lectures about Iowa into two parts. First is to try to explain the process itself to you, because that is probably every bit as important as the results. If you understand the process, you understand why you have to be very cautious about interpreting the Iowa caucus results. And then second lecture will be, I will actually try to explain the different things that go into the decisions that Iowa voters are making and what happens in terms of the outcome and what I believe is likely to be the outcome. I want to make sure you understand the process of the Iowa caucus, how the caucuses work, because it differs. Now, first of all, let me define a caucus for you. What is a caucus? A political caucus is usually defined as a group of individuals belonging to the same political party who meet to discuss issues, to discuss candidates and so forth. And that is really what it is in the state of Iowa. Now, Iowa, the rules and everything for the caucuses are not mandated by the legislature. They're mandated by the political parties, the Iowa Democratic Party, the Iowa Republican Party, and they're acting within guidelines put forth by the Democratic and Republican national committees. So caucuses are run by political parties, okay, which means that the results are going to be reported through the political party. And I think this is important for you to realize, because there is a possibility that the parties are not as adept at gathering the vote as the news media might be, that the party is not as adept in terms of doing the math that has to be involved, and I'll explain that in just a few minutes. So my point here is that the Iowa caucuses are always, in terms of the reporting process, are almost always fraught with some difficulty, some problem. Okay? And the same thing is likely to happen this time around. Now, I've been at the out in Iowa at times for the various caucuses over the years, and I can tell you it's a very, very unique and positive experience for most Iowans, in the sense that they have spent the past year having a chance to interact with the various candidates and in what we call retail politics, by and large. Candidates are expected to come to Iowa, spend a lot of time in Iowa, spend a lot of time at small events that might have 25, 50, 75 people, in addition to larger rallies. But it's retail politics, the candidate talking one-on-one to individuals. And when you talk to Iowans, some of them will be able to list for you each candidate that they have seen. And in some cases, they've seen them all. In some cases, they may have even shook hands with each of the candidates. So it's a very different process. And I think for many who are not familiar with the Iowa caucuses, you fail to realize the uniqueness of it, and I want to make sure that you do. Okay, so now let's start. Democrats. The Democrats do their caucus in the following way. It's a very interesting process. Approximately 1,800, 1,700 plus precincts in the state of Iowa. Precinct being a voting district. Okay? What happens is they appoint they either elected a precinct chairperson or chairperson who convenes that caucus. The caucus might be held in their home, might be held in a public place. It's not necessarily held in places where people have voted in the past. That's important, because if you're used to voting in a town hall and suddenly you have to go to someone's home in order to attend the caucus, that might cause you not to go. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, the process begins usually at 7 o'clock with everyone coming in and signing in. You have to sign in. You have to be a registered Democrat, or if you're not, you can participate in the caucus if you can show proof that you will be voting by the fall, by November 8th of 2016. In that case, you're also permitted into the caucus. Okay? So then what happens? Well, normally, again, the chair of the caucus has a great deal of discretion. They run the caucus. Okay? Now, the members of the caucus can overrule them, but it's highly unlikely that they do so. So the first thing that happens normally is everyone might introduce themselves. Maybe there's 20 people in the room. Maybe there's 100 people in the room. We just don't know. Depends upon the size of the caucus. So the chair will convene the caucus. Everyone will sign in. And then people who want to say why they support a specific candidate have the chance, in most cases, to give a 2, 3, 4-minute commentary on why candidate X is the one who should be chosen by that caucus and receive support. Well, in the Democratic case, you have 3 candidates. What if 10 people want to speak for each one? You can see the process can go on and on and on. Normally a caucus lasts between an hour and 2 hours. There are times they can go on for 3 and 4 hours, depending upon what is happening. Okay? So after the discussion about the candidates and so forth, the chair will ask, and it's a very simple process, the chair will ask that those who support, let's say, Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Governor O'Malley, to go to a corner of the room, and they'll divide the people accordingly. So let's say there are 40 people in there, let's say there are 45 people in the room. If 15 of them go to each of the 3 corners, okay, then you have what is called the viability rule that comes in. In order to be valid, to be viable, you have to have 15% of the people in the room. If there are 45 people in the room, 15% is what, about 7. So you can see that all the candidates have 7, so we continue. But what happens if one or 2 of the candidates don't have the 15%? Well, what happens then is the chair will say, you are not viable. Okay? Your candidate is not viable in this particular caucus. And then what happens? You have the option, you can just say, okay, fine, I'm leaving. Or you could go to another candidate, your second choice, and become part of their group. Or they might try to convince you why you should come to that group. If you saw the debate last night, the town hall in Iowa the other day, last evening, Governor O'Malley was asked what he would do if he didn't, where he would ask his non-viable delegates to go. And he said no, he wants them to stay and persevere. Okay? So now what you have is the groups divided. Remember, this is a public showing of support, nothing secret here. So your neighbors know who you're supporting, and everyone in the room knows who you're supporting. So what happens? You then divide according, as long as you have 15%, and then you pledge that you're going to help that particular candidate in terms of delegate selection. They are not picking delegates to the national convention. They aren't even picking delegates to the state convention. They're picking delegates to the county convention. So in February, they pick delegates to the county convention. In March, they pick the county conventions are held, they pick delegates to the congressional district convention, which is usually held in April, and then they pick delegates to go to the state convention. This year, it's May 21st in Iowa. Only after May 21st will we know the breakdown of delegates for each of the candidates, after the state convention has been held. So coming out of coming out of February 1st and the caucuses, you're not going to know for sure how the delegates are pledged. However, the media will extrapolate. They'll say, well, look, it looks as if Senator Sanders had 55% of the support in the various caucuses, therefore he'll probably end up with 55% of the state delegation. Very risky to do that. We know at times that in fact candidates win the state of Iowa caucuses, but at the convention they have no delegates from Iowa because of the 3 steps that follow. So very difficult to draw firm conclusions in terms of actual delegate count. Second thing is that, remember I said this is public, so people know how you have, what your preferences are and so forth. Now let's switch for a moment to the Republican side. Republicans do it much differently. They convene again in precincts, precinct locations within precincts. They have a chair there. Normally what happens, it used to be you simply come in and show your hands as to which candidate you were supporting, and the chair tabulates that. Okay? It's different now. In most places, they provide you with a paper ballot, which means it's secret, and you can vote the way you want. You then cast that ballot. The chair counts them and indicates the number of votes for each of the candidates. Okay? Now remember, the Republicans have numerous candidates that are possible here. So keeping this straight is not necessarily an easy task. Then what happens? How do they report this? Gets called into the county, where the county does a tabulation as to each precinct in the county. You get a countywide total. That countywide total is usually either sent by a computer file or called into Des Moines, and the Republican Party announces the tabulation. Okay? Again, you can see the difficulties in trying to do this. So what does the media do? They do several things. Number one, they will get some information directly from the parties, but two, they will also do some exit polling from what they consider to be key precincts, or precincts that more or less mirror how the general voting pattern in Iowa is. And based on that, they will then try to project the total statewide vote as well as the allocation of delegates. Again, it's a very imprecise method and can lead to a lot of difficulty and problems. So, and for the Republicans, they have not actually selected any delegates either, but they are pledged to use roughly the proportions that each of the delegates get, as long as they meet a proportionality rule, which could be up to 20% when they go to their state convention. So this is the reason why Iowa is so important. Iowa traditionally has been more conservative in terms of the Republicans. In terms of Mike Huckabee was the winner in 2012. Rick Santorum was the winner in 2012. Huckabee in 2008. Neither one went on to do too much. The Democrats have a better track record, and normally the winner of the Iowa caucuses has about a 75–80% chance of then being the winner of the actual nomination. So you can see why this is such an important process for Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders, and why they've put a lot of money, time, and effort into this. So with that, I'll conclude this lecture with one bit of advice for you. Be very cautious in trying to interpret the results of the Iowa caucus. As I mentioned, there are all sorts of issues, all sorts of problems. On the other hand, the caucuses do give you an insight into at least how the voters of Iowa are thinking at this point in time. So pay close attention. The media will devote a lot of time to the Iowa caucuses and their interpretation of it. It'll be the main buzz for a day or two before they move on to talking about New Hampshire. Thank you.